Okay.
Okay, cool. So we're live.
Yes.
And Daniela, oh, Destiny's here.
Oh, yeah, I can hear now.
Yay! Okay,
Hey.
we're all here. So Destiny had asked to go over 2D arrays,
Oh,
and
cool.
Daniela said she has a personal programming project,
Uh-huh.
which she needs help with, maybe.
Yeah. Well, we could do like the two-dimensional array stuff first because it's kind of like not like a general thing, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
might be easy.
All right.
I don't mind watching too. If you want to go over that too.
Okay.
And go over what?
Your project, I don't mind that either.
Okay. But also could we go over like or like just maybe like the array method interaction?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So, okay, let's do that then. Let's do arrays and then 2D arrays, and then if we have time at the end, we'll talk about your problem. Cool.
Okay, yeah.
On the screen. And we're good to go. Cool. So, sorry, I just did a control find here. So we have arrays. Okay, arrays in Java. So what do you guys know about arrays?
You can store like a group of data that's like all of the same type.
Awesome. So,
Yeah. And yeah, they're kind of like different, like they're like different trash bins. Well, they're not like trash, but you know, like they're different bins, and then you can store infinite amounts of data into them.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. When you say infinite amount, what do you mean?
Huh?
So you said you can store infinite amounts of data, what do you mean by that? So are arrays like, are they fixed length, or can you add on to them as much as you want?
You can add on as much as you want.
Okay, so if
The only thing that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The only thing that's fixed would be like the number of bins, or I guess the number of lockers that you have. Like that needs to be fixed.
Exactly. Exactly. So once you set the size of the bin, you can't change it. True. And then you said they hold things of the same type. Cool.
Yeah.
So can you think of another example of something that's like an array? So we have here lockers. You just gave the bin example. What's another example?
Oh, if you're trying to like organize crayons by color. My teacher was showing me an example with crayons today. That's why. But if you like want to organize them by colors, you would like, let's say there are only 5 types of colors. So then you would have your 5 bins, and then you don't know how many of each color you're gonna have. So then you have to, so then you would store the color to the bin, but you don't know how many crayons you can have it per bin.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So then you would have like pink or yellow for crayons, let's say, and then you might have a different number in each. But they're all crayons and they all have a bin to go to, right?
Yes.
Cool. So how do you declare an array? I mean, there are a few different ways to do it.
So like a one-dimensional array?
Yeah.
Okay, so it would be some like let's say if you wanted to make. Oh, do you want us to like look at the screen and like go from there, or?
Nope, that's fine. If I gave you the example, I want an array of decimals that is titled, that holds, I don't know, the height in inches of my 10 best friends. How would you declare that?
Okay, so if you want decimals, so then you'd use a double. So then it'd be like double square bracket, which indicates that it's an array. Then you would like space, and then you name it something. So I guess you could name it best friends.
Yeah.
So I guess you could name it best friends. And then you would equal like, okay, sorry, it'd be equals, then it'd be new, I think.
Yep.
New new double and then you'd have square brackets, but in the brackets you would have like your value. So you have 10 best friends, so then you put 10.
Cool. And to round it off, I'd have a semicolon, right?
Yeah, that too.
Awesome. So that's exactly right. So this is basically creating an array of size 10 of doubles. Cool.
Yes.
So in the line above, or the lines above, like 6 and 7, where they just set it equal to null, that's like a way to just declare it, but you're not saying how bigger the array is.
Exactly. So you're saying that there exists an array, basically like a chunk of memory, right? Which high scores is pointing to, and it's going to hold ints, but I don't know how big it is, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. There's also a way. What if I knew I wanted my array to hold the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and that was it? How would I do that?
Say that again.
So I want my array to look like this.
Oh.
But I don't want to have to go through and say like array at 0 equals 1, array at 1 equals.
You would use the curly braces.
Yeah, exactly. So what would that line look like?
If you had like never made the array before,
Yes.
then you would have just did, well, this would be int, so just like int, then the hard bracket, you would name it.
You can call it, yeah, go for it.
Numbers, I don't know.
Yeah. That was what I was going to say.
Equals, so then you do curly braces. And then I think you would just do like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then end curly brace and semicolon.
Exactly right. So now this has 4 elements in it, and those 4 lockers, like we talked about earlier, have the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Can I add anything? Can I have a 5th element? Is this valid if I did something like this?
No.
And why, or why not? So why not?
Because it doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. Because this is what the array looks like. And if you try to access the 5th or the 4th index, it doesn't exist. And what error would you get? Exception, I should say.
Would it be a runtime error? Actually, I'm not even sure.
I don't like, like compile versus runtime errors are just.
Yeah, they're a little on the, it's really like a guessing game.
So one thing is the runtime errors are basically when your code doesn't, like, for example, infinite while loop, right? That is a runtime error because you don't realize anything's wrong. Like everything is valid, right? The compiler doesn't see anything wrong until you run it, and then you get that error, runtime error. A compile time error is something where, for example, here, it can't even access the left side. So it would be a compile time error. It's not even going to try to do this equals 5 business because that's going to be during runtime. Compile time is just checking if like the left side actually makes sense.
So for I know that like in JavaScript you can like there's like a push method that you can add something to the end of an array. Can you not do that in Java?
For arrays?
Yeah.
So not in arrays, so not in Java, not for arrays, but the data structure list or array list, you can add and insert elements.
Okay.
So have you guys talked about array lists at all?
No. Well, you can go first.
Okay. We have like a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you know? What do you know about array lists then?
I know I've used it. I'm trying to remember what we used it for.
So just like how arrays are fixed and, well, I guess they hold the same type. Array lists are
Mhm.
dynamic, meaning you can add to them. And like if I had an array list that looked like this. Oh my gosh, 2, 3, 4. If I added to this array list, I could insert a 5 here because it's dynamic. The size can change.
So if you were declaring an array list,
Mhm.
you would, like your type is array or your type is array list?
So your array list is the data structure, right? Just like how your array is a data structure, but the array holds a certain type of object. So your array list holds a type of object.
Okay.
In this case, we could say integer, right? And because it's an object, if you're going to do this kind of, you're calling the constructor.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that's incorrect. But we want to have the name of the array list because we need to name it. So if we call this numbers, we would call the constructor, like I mentioned earlier, of the array list, something like this.
And you would just put like how you put integer, it's like you put the types within those, I don't know what to call them.
Yeah, brackets. Yeah, I'm not really sure what to call them either. But yeah, exactly. You put the type right here. So you specify the type,
Mm-hmm.
and you specify the type down here. And these parentheses basically are you calling the array list constructor.
Okay.
And if we look up Java 8 docs array list, it's actually a class.
Okay.
So it has all these methods. Doo-doo-doo. So it has add, it has insert, clear, get, index of, right? So clearly much more robust than just a simple array that just kind of holds things, right? An array list can really help you do more. So for example, I could say numbers dot add 5, and that would be totally valid.
So when would you use an array versus an array list?
That's a great question. When do you think? When do you think you use an array versus an array list?
I guess just whenever you want to go back and be able to add numbers. I'm not sure.
Right. Let's make a note of it. I'm just going to keep typing here. If that's fine with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So array versus array list. So we said array list is better when you are adding numbers or when you don't know the fixed size, right? So when not a fixed size, or I should say when there's an unknown size. What's another reason you would use an array list over an array?
Let's see. I guess unknown size if you want to modify anything.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because you can you can remove also, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So is possible to add and remove, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Why would you want to use an array?
Structure or better, like it's solid, it's reliable, it's organized.
Exactly. So, right, exactly. So it's solid, it's static, which is a word to say that it doesn't, you
Yeah,
can't.
that's much better.
I mean, solid is cool too, but static is the SE word. So
Yeah.
it's static, you can't change it. You can change the elements in it, but you can't change the size, we should say.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. What about the different types of objects or like elements they can hold? Is there a difference between them? Like for example, if I wanted to if there was a class called cats and I wanted to add a bunch of cats into a data structure, should I use an array or an array list? Does it matter?
If you wanted to add a bunch of cats,
Yeah, like cat objects.
cat objects.
Yeah.
Do you know how many cat objects you want to add?
Yeah, let's say I want to add 4.
Then you would want to use an array because you know how many objects, how many
Sure.
cats you want to add.
So if I wanted to add or create an array of cats with the class name cat, how would I do that?
So you had 4, so then it'd be an integer. So then int square brackets cats. Wait, you said array, right?
Yeah, so I want an array of type cat.
So would you use cat and then the brackets?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Because this piece is telling you the type of element that's within the data structure.
Oh.
with an array list, because an array list is an object, can you not put objects inside of it?
That's a really great question. And the answer is you can put objects inside of it. In fact, that's how they work. Because here, this is the type of element within our array list,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if I wanted to make an array list of cats, I would say array list cat, and then cats equals new array list cat, like that, right?
Can you explain that again, please?
Sure. Which idea specific?
Just like why, like Destiny said something, and like she was asking you a question, and then it kind of fit the answer, but I lost that part.
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
I think she asked, so in the example of an array, right? We are creating an array of cats. So I'm going to do this, and let's set it to null, because that's fine.
Mhm.
Or we could even say new cat, and I said I wanted 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's fine too. But in this example, right, we're creating an array that holds cats. So this is an array that holds cat objects, specifically like exactly 4 cat objects. Here,
Mhm.
Destiny asked, lists are objects themselves. Is it okay if they hold object elements versus like an int or a double, which are primitive types?
Mhm.
So the answer is yes, and that's actually like how they end up working. That's like the fundamental thing about array lists is that they have to hold object types.
Okay.
So here, this is an array list. I should follow convention. So an array list that holds or that will hold objects. Does that answer the question or explain
Yeah.
more? Okay, cool. So, yeah, cool. We were talking about this, I think. So arrays versus array list. So that was a good point. So both of them can only hold the type that is specified when you declare it. So both arrays and array lists will type that you specify when you declare them. Cool. So they're kind of the same in that sense. Awesome. That's cool. Any questions about this or anything you want to see? What if situations before we move on?
So you know how, okay, so you can have a 2D array where there's an array within arrays, right? Can you have array list in array list?
Yeah, you totally could. An example of that, or could you think of an example where you want an array list of array lists?
Well, I'm still kind of struggling of when you would want a 2D array.
Ah, okay, cool. So we'll talk about that in a few then. And then I'm sure we'll be able to come up with array list examples. Cool. But before we move on to that, anything else or?
I don't know.
Okay, we'll keep moving. I'm sure questions will come up. So we've talked about creating an array. Oh, here they make a note that when you create an array, all the elements are initialized to 0 for ints and double arrays, and false if they're a Boolean array, or null if they hold objects. So in this example here with their cats, this would actually look like if I went and peeked into my computer and looked at the memory location, it would look like this. Null, null. Yeah, make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's important to note. Here we talk about putting values in an array. Okay. So I think it was Destiny who asked, when you declare the array with null on the right side, you're just saying that it exists, but you don't know the size yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So here what they've done is they've said like, hey, I'm going to declare that this is an array, and then later on, I'll let you know exactly how big it is. Right? So they take high scores, and they say it's a new 5-element array. Cool. And then they go ahead and insert values. Is there another way to insert values into an array?
Let's see. I know there's another way. I'm just trying to remember.
We kind of covered it earlier.
Oh, you're talking about like when you just
Yeah.
like when you make the array for the very first time.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, it was a little bit of a trick question, but yeah. So you can, the other way to declare elements in an array is to just do it in line when you declare it the first time. Other than that, you do have to, if you want to change a value, you really do have to say the full name, the index, and the value you're changing it to.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to change high scores at index 2 to 100, what would I do?
You said change the score at what?
At index 2.
Oh, then you would just do the high scores and in the brackets do the 2 and set it to something different.
Yeah, exactly. If I wanted to change it to 100, I would do that. And then
So for an array list, what does that look like?
Okay. Yeah. So for an array list, let's actually just hop on over. So there is a method called add, right? And it says right here, add, so appends the specified element to the end of the list, right? But what we just talked about was changing an element at a certain index.
Yeah.
So there's another add method that takes 2 parameters, and this one inserts the specified element at the specific position in the list. So for us, that would mean, let me just copy this so you guys can see it. If I had array list here of high scores, right, and I have it declared correctly and everything, and I wanted to change the value at index 2, how would I do that? And this is the method that we're trying to use.
Okay.
So what would my first parameter be then?
So wouldn't it be whatever you're trying to change? So would it be high scores 2?
That's a good question. So I would do this, is what you're suggesting?
Well, it would be in the square bracket.
Ooh, okay. But since we're in an array list, that's actually a really good point. Because when you're in an array list, when you're trying to change the array list, you're calling methods on the high scores object.
Okay.
So
Whereas,
you want the 2.
yeah, so your first parameter would be the 2, because you're saying that's the index I'm trying to change. And if I want to change it to 100,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Yeah, I've seen that before.
yeah. And yeah, exactly. So when you want to change an array list, you're actually calling a method on the array list object, which is
Oh.
high scores. And then you're calling the add method with the right parameters on that object. And on the other hand, when you're changing an array, you are literally just accessing like the pointer that points to the lockers and saying, hey, that second locker, we need to put 100 in that, not a 98.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of like, and say that we wanted to remove, or let's say we want to do this. Oh, let's add, because right now, our array list, the current list looks like this, right? It looks like, actually, what does it look like? I'll ask you guys to fill it in. After this line, what does it look like?
Like,
Well, we never said how big it was, but since we changed something that was at position 2, should we just have a null at position 0 and 1?
Yeah, that's exactly right. This would say 100. That's exactly right, because we said earlier that when you initialize an array and it for objects, it defaults to null, right? And
Okay.
we've already changed, so I should say here, the current list up here looks like null, 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 or honestly, it doesn't look like anything, right? Like null forever.
So if we had just used the add method, like we weren't trying to replace anything, what would it have done? Would it have just made something at position 0 because
Yes.
it's added it to something empty?
Exactly. So if we had done add like 92,
Yeah.
we would have done 92.
Okay.
Cool. And now let's see if I wanted to remove something. So if, let's say this add 92 happened, so that was already there. And then we did add at index to 100. We have this. What happens if I want to remove 92? First of all, how do I do that? Let's see.
well, it said we'll remove the element from position in the list to be the remove index. So then I guess it'd be, let's see, it'd be high scores dot remove. And then, so the 92 would be in index 0.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so then it'd be high scores dot remove 0 and then 92. Semicolon.
So I copied the header of the method, and all you need is the index. You don't actually have to know what's at the index.
Oh, okay. So then it would just be 0.
Exactly.
Mm.
And then what would the current list look like?
Well, since you're because like you can actually change the length of an array list, does it just change to null 100 because it's just like gets rid of it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It goes to index 0, removes the 92, and keeps the rest of the array.
So if you remove an array list, you change the position of everything else that comes after it.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you say that again, please?
So if I remove 92 from this array list,
Yeah.
I change the position of all the other elements in the list, as well as the total size of the array list,
Gotcha.
right? Because up here size is 3, down here size is 2 because we removed 92.
Gotcha.
So that's important. Cool. There are actually quite a few methods or quite a few things you can do with array lists. You could even remove, so there's a remove int index method where you like remove the element at that index, which is what we just did. But you could also just remove object. So I could say here, iscores.remove 92. And that would remove the 92. That would do the same thing.
So that would just remove anything with the value of 92. So how would it know, like, let's say that like our array list was like the 1, 2, like it went, like it had integers and it went like 1, 2, 2, 3 or whatever. So like if you ask it to remove 2, how would it know if you're talking about position 2 or value 2?
That's a really good question. I think, I don't recall exactly. For this, you might actually have to do something like new integer 92. So you're making this now an object because it requires an object parameter.
Okay.
Because if you just called 92 with how I had it earlier, 92 is actually an int. So it would be like, hey, that's not a valid index.
Okay.
So doing something like this would make it an object that is an integer object of 92. And then it would try to remove that.
So when you use like the full word integer, like that's not a primitive type anymore, that's a object?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so when you try and store numbers in an array list, you can't use the primitive type like you can with a regular array.
Perfect. Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
And so some other common ones are, let me just remove this, but int maps to like integer, and there's double. I'm trying to think, and I also think Boolean. Basically, it's the same thing in object form, yeah. And we can also look that up because that's always fun. Integer doc. See what happens. Yeah, cool. There's even a number class, right? So yeah, so this is the constructor for an integer object. It just takes the int you give it, kind of like how I did here, new integer. It makes an integer object out of it. Yeah. Cool. Good talk. All right, do you guys want to talk about 2D arrays now?
Sure.
Or do you still want to talk about what we were doing earlier?
I'm fine with anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing that if we could talk about is like method in arrays,
Okay.
like calling, like, you know how to set it up, because I kind of mix that up sometimes.
Yes. Okay. Let's go back. There might be a few examples here. Hmm. Let's actually, I might just do we'll just make an example. Oops. Want the visualizer. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna call this test. It's my life easier. And say we want to, let's see. Let's write a method that takes in an array and does some math on the array and returns that number. So let's say we want to write, we have this class, let's call it math. We want, so the goal is to write a method that takes in an array and returns the average. So how would I do that? What would my header look like? And then we'll talk about the parameters and then the body. Any ideas?
Write a method that takes in an array. Let's see.
So the first thing we need is the method header, right? And usually for the header, it's either public, private, or static. That's a keyword. Or sorry, public. What is it? Public or private? What's the third one?
Void?
Sorry. Yeah.
I think we've only talked about public and private in my class.
Oh. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Have you guys, so you haven't talked about protected at all?
No, and we barely talked about private. Like, it was just like, you know,
our
mentioned
teacher
in
makes us use private sometimes, but she's like, on the AP exam, they probably only want you to use public.
Ooh, okay. We can talk about it real quick. It's not too complicated. So a public method is basically a method that any class can see. So if I have my math class here and my science class somewhere else, history, English, all of those classes can access whatever method I write if there's a public in front of it. Okay. Private means only math, only my current class can see this method. So science has no way of knowing or using math's private methods. All good? All good till there? Okay. Protected means if I have a class like this, math, and then within my math class, if I declare a class called algebra, and that has its own constructor and its own functions, right? So it has a constructor, has functions, data, it has its own stuff. I could say that this method is protected and it would not be seen if I made like a protected method within algebra. It would only be seen by algebra and math, no one else.
Oh, so just the class you're in and the bigger class, not all the ones that share the bigger class.
Not all the ones.
Like if you had like a trig, like algebra and math could see it, but trig couldn't.
Yes, exactly. So if I was, yeah, that's actually a really good example. So if I have my math class, I have algebra within math, and then I have trig here. The protected method in trig would not, like, algebra wouldn't be able to see that, but math would.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's kind of like the package you're in. And protected is used a lot in like industry code where they have like both like class within class within class, you know? But usually in your like in school you won't have to use it. Any questions about that? Kind of a strange thing.
I just don't get what's the point. Like, I'm a little confused about why you don't want other classes to be able to use your C.
I think some of it is conceptual. Like, why would the science class ever need to know, or why would they ever need to know how to multiply numbers or something like that? You know, so there's no reason. Like, there's no harm in making it public, right? Because science might never use it. But by making it private, you're saying like very like strictly that no one else can see this because it doesn't matter to anyone else. That's one reason that I've talked about before. Another reason, I don't know. Why do you think? Like, why would you want to make certain methods private over public?
Also, like I guess it would keep things out of the way. Like it would kind of just, like if it's something is designated for something in particular, then you don't have to worry about it interacting with some other methods that you would need to use.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good point. You could have private methods that just do things like do simpler functions, and then the public methods might be use those private functions, right? And that might be the one that really does need to be public for everyone to see. Yeah, it's a really good point. Cool. That's good. So that's kind of a little aside, but that's the public-private protected deal. So that's always the first thing you're going to do when you're writing a method header. What's the second thing you got to consider?
What you're going to return?
Yes, true. So what you want to return. Before that even, there's something that we should talk about. This word here. So we would want to say static or not static. What does a static method mean?
I mean, I kind of just skip that part, and usually the code runs, so I just ignore it.
Okay.
I mean, that's probably not the best thing to do.
Any guesses?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I really don't understand.
Okay, that's totally fine. That's why we're here. So, so when a method is static, it means that you don't need an instance of the class to run the method. So that means if I had a static, let's say I had public static int average, right? If I wanted to call this function in main, I don't actually have to make a math object. I can simply do math.average, and then it would return. However, if I had a method called that wasn't static, and I call it sum, I would have to create a math object. I'm gonna be really lame and call it math object. New math, and then I would have to call the method on the object, and only then would it work.
Okay.
Static, not static.
And so the computer just assumes that you're
Mm,
Because is that why I've seen like where they don't put it in,
Mhm.
like they don't write not static.
yeah, exactly. So the default is to be not static, meaning the computer expects you to create an object of that class and then call the method on the object, right? And the reason for that, let's see, I believe, trying to think of a good example. Because when you do something like this, right, it makes sense that you wouldn't want this to be static because you want to find the sum of a math object, not just the math class in general, right?
Mhm.
But say I wanted to find, let's see, like the size of the class, the math class.
Mm-hmm.
I would want that to be static, right? Because I could just call math dot size of class, and it would tell me how many people were in my math class, for example.
Okay.
Right? I don't need an actual math object to find out how many people are in. That
Yeah.
kind of makes sense. I think like these examples are just like bare minimum. I think we can go over like more descriptive, more robust examples later on. But that's the general idea. So static means you don't need an instance to call the method. And if you don't say anything, if you don't specify, like we don't here, you have to create an object and call the method on the object. Good?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's the second thing to consider. The third thing we said is what you want to return. So the type, right? So
Yeah.
the type of what you want to return. Cool. And then what's the last kind of few things to look at in a header? Name. Yep, name. And then what kind of goes with that?
The arguments.
Yes. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. So this is like 101, how to create a method header. So I'm going to delete these because we don't want them. I'm going to delete this stuff too. So back to our original goal. We want to write a method that takes in an array and returns the average of the array. So how should we start our method header? So number one. Do we want to be public, private, or protected?
Public.
Yeah, public seems pretty safe because we want other classes to be able to use this method. Static or not static?
Static.
Okay, if we say static, that's just a choice. We can go with static. And what type of is the return going to be?
So I guess integers.
Yeah, it could be an int. What does it actually matter? Like, because sometimes your average might turn out to be decimal, right?
Sorry.
Like your average might turn out to be a decimal or not a whole number.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's your call. Do you want to make it an int or a double? Doesn't really matter.
Destiny, do you have a preference?
I think doubles are cool.
Okay. Double it is. Okay, cool. And then what do we want to call this? It's average.
Yep.
Cool. And then what should our argument be? So this is kind of going back to the original question. passing in an array.
So,
yeah.
I mean, it would depend on if your original array had ints or doubles in it.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say our original has ints in it. So we want to put an int array as a parameter here, as an argument.
I think I saw something where you have to like change it from a double to an int.
Ooh, for casting purposes?
Yeah.
So that actually has to do with when you are dividing things.
Oh, okay.
We might actually have to talk about later, but for now we don't have to. I'll give you a hint. There is a method on the screen at the moment that takes in an array of strings.
Oh, the main method.
Yeah.
Okay, see, I've never understood why it takes in that.
Okay, same. It blew my mind when I learned, like when someone first told me. So let's first answer this question.
Yeah.
So how would we do, how would we pass in an int array as an argument? What would I type?
Int and then hard brackets.
Yep. And then this name, this name could be anything. And I'll explain in a second. But let's say this is nums. Or even grades. That make more sense. I'm gonna find the average of some grades. But okay, so the reason that the main method takes in an argument or takes in an array of strings, and it's also static, keep in mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's basically happening is the array of strings that the main method takes in is whatever is in the main method.
Okay.
It takes in the literal lines that are in the method and then runs them. And then there's like other stuff which is out of the scope of this class, but basically it creates an array out of the strings of code, like the lines of code within the method, and then compiles and runs them. And that's why the main method takes in an array of strings. And here they call them args, as in arguments.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So lines we want to run, lines of code we want to run.
Okay.
Yeah. That was just revolutionary. I was like, oh my God, it's an array of strings. But yeah. Okay, cool. So how do we actually want to do this? We need to find the sum of... All good?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to find the sum of grades and then divide by the number of grades, right?
Mm-hmm.
How should we do that?
Well, you should, I mean, loop through it, but I guess you have options.
Yeah.
Like
No, I think
for a while or...
Yeah. So anything works. Do you want to just give me a solution? We can fix it or change it as we see fit. We want to loop through it, right? Let's do a for loop. And when do we want to stop?
When it's grade stop length.
And we're gonna increment I. And what are we doing inside the for loop?
Well, I guess I would say you'd be adding them up, but then you would need to like declare like a sum, I guess. Like, would you need to declare a sum that way it didn't get like...
You would assign it to a variable.
Yeah, exactly. You both are completely right. So we'd want to have some sort of variable, right, that can hold the sum. So what would we want to do here? We want to set our sum to sum plus
grades at position I.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. So now we can assume that we have gone through the entire array grades and sum is equal to the sum of it. Now we want to return the average. So we want to return sum divided by,
the grades.lang.
yeah, exactly. Cool. That should work.
Yeah.
So let's test it out. We've made it static, so I can simply do math.average. I need to pass in an int array. And so how do I, in one line, declare an array of the numbers 98, 92, 97, and 100?
Wait, quick question.
Yeah.
So then your main method doesn't necessarily have to come first?
Oh yeah, it doesn't have to come first. It doesn't have to.
I really thought that's what it had to, like, I thought the main method always had to go first.
Nope, it's just another method.
So
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
our teacher makes us like run it separately. Like she makes us like create a new class. Cause like she makes us use Eclipse and like
Yeah.
create a class that's called like, I don't know, like average tester or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's honestly, it's just like it's a good practice kind of thing. But you can have the main method in this class and that's totally fine too. It'll still run. Yeah. So the main method is the only method that will do the whole thing where it reads the body and tries to execute the lines. So, and when you have like an average or like a math tester, for example, all that main method is doing is calling methods from the math class, right? So the math class can do that itself. It doesn't need a math tester. So let's say, so for the sake of time, we wanted to make, let's say, so my grades, I want some grades in one. Let's be more realistic here, probably like an 82. Got 100 once, good job. Cool, so let's get my average. So what should I pass in here? What argument should I pass in?
My grades.
Exactly. And I just tried to save a website. This is going to return a number, but I actually, if I want to print it, how do I do that?
Print out. Oh wait, wouldn't you need to assign math.average my grades to a variable and then print out the variable? Or could you do that?
Yeah, that's definitely a solution. So I could say double average equals math.average my grades, and then system.out.print line. My average, is, you could also simply just throw this in the parentheses, and that would do the same thing.
Cool.
Cool. So let's try to run it. All right, let's see what happens. Where is the run button? Yes. Okie doke. So it's going to step through the whole thing. But yeah, so whoever said about like having the main method first, that's definitely not a thing. It just starts at the main method. It starts to execute the lines. So we have my grades, as you see here. Next step. So we are inside average. And what's going to happen? What do you guys think is going to happen?
Sorry?
Any guesses on like what's going to happen next? We're at line 12. And
I mean, did it already create the sum?
it did not. We have some equals 0, I think. Yep.
Okay.
Sum equals 0. So we're going to step forward. Okay, I is 0. So now we can watch sum appear slowly increase as we go through the forward loop. Cool. Now we're done with that. And we're returning sum divided by grades.length. Okay. Oh,
So
yeah.
it just threw away all the decimal points.
Yeah, it did. Or did it? Yeah, I mean, obviously. It definitely did. Because sum is an int, right?
Mhm.
And grades.length is an int. And therefore, int divided by int gives you int. Not
Integer.
How would we fix that?
Isn't there like you can do like double in parentheses?
So that's called casting. So we're going to cast our return value. And let's do that. Let's throw double out here and see what happens. So we're stepping forward, stepping forward. So cool. We're at 257, 357. We're done with our for loop. Aha! So now we have our decimal,
Mhm.
right? So what we did here is we basically said that treat sum as a double, as 357.0, and then divide by 4. And because you're dividing then a double by an int, it'll return a double.
Although, like, wouldn't, like, realistically speaking, wouldn't you want it to be an int since it's grades?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. Like if
Yeah.
your teacher didn't round.
Yeah, like, because it would automatically do it.
But
Oh
say
no, we see decimal points.
We don't really see ours.
Our teachers can set whether we can see them or not, and so you like actually can see.
But say that your teacher rounded, right? If you had 89.6 and you didn't do this casting, you would have an 89, not a 90, right?
Yeah.
Because if you did int by int, it would just cut off the rest of the number. It would not round up. So there's that too.
So would you have to, like, would you have, for rounding, is there something that already exists for rounding, or would you have to like make a method to round?
Ooh, that's a good question. I do believe there is a math class that has a round method. Round, yeah. Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So round. Or longs, ints, doubles, floats. Or not for float, I guess, but returns the closest int to the argument with ties rounding up.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Where were we? Yeah. Cool, so where were we? Yeah. Okay, so we returned our average, right? And we're just gonna print it out. Cool, and this is the output up here. My average is 89.25. So I have one final question, and then we can be done for today, because it's around an hour. Here I have my array titled as grades, and within my method I refer to it as grades. Down here I have a my grades array, and I call the average method with my grades. What is the difference, and like how does that work?
Okay, I had to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's like different. Hold on, because They're words that I need to like memorize better, but my grades is the name of your array, but grades itself is used as a variable, so they're different.
Yeah, that is correct. So if I made a change to grades within this method, would my grades change at all?
No.
No, exactly. And why not?
Because it's like you're just telling, like, because you're like returning an average, you're like not actually doing anything to the array that you pass into your method. It's just, I don't know, it's just like using it and then returning something else.
Yeah,
I don't know how to describe it.
absolutely. So what if I said now I did something like this? I have my average, right? But
Mhm.
say I want to, for some reason, I'm going to add that average
Come here.
to the first element. So what if I said grades at 0 equals grades at 0 plus average? Or what is it? Plus, well, blah, blah, blah. Say this is double average, right? Equals average. Wait, sorry, we're returning average. Do you guys see what I did there real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you think my grades will change if we do this within the method?
Yeah, because you set something in it to a different value.
Okay,
Oh, you're adding you're adding the 82 to the average.
I'm adding the 82. Yeah, yes.
Right, because you're calling from the from index 0 to the average. So therefore it wouldn't actually be your average.
True, it wouldn't be my, well,
Well, it would be your average plus the first grade.
actually here what I'm doing is I am,
Oh, you're just returning the average, and that would be something else.
right. But my question is, would my grades at index 0 change if I change the grades array variable in the method? So let's see.
Yes.
Because before, like, the way we learned it was that, like, what you had before you decide, like, before you changed grades at position 0 was like an accessor method or something, like, because you're like just getting information.
Right.
But then if you change something in it, then we called it like a mutator method because you were like,
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Cool. So before we were using it as an accessor method, right? We were just referring to the my grades array.
What's an accessor method and then the mutation method?
Yeah. Do you want to explain, Destiny?
Sure. Okay, so what I think is that an accessor method is like whatever you're passing into it, like your argument, you're just using it for information. So it's like instead of like if you're using it to like if you had get average or whatever, it's like an accessor because you're just using it for information. But if it's a mutator, you're changing what your argument is, like whatever you passed into it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think another way that people are taught it is getters and setters.
Oh, I'm familiar with getters and setters.
Yeah. So a getter is an accessor. You're just like, hey, like you're hollering at a friend. You're like, hey, what's your name? And they're like, oh, my name's John. You're like, oh, cool. But a mutator, right, is like, hey, John, how many apples are you holding? And then you throw him an apple, right? So his apple count is going to increase. So you're changing the value. So before, we were just finding the average of grades. We weren't messing with the actual grades array at all. Here, we've added this line 18, and now we're mutating the actual array. Because if I step forward, if you look up here, we're actually changing the value in the array. So now we're mutating it. So the average is still the same because I didn't change what we were returning, but for some reason now, for whatever reason, we're also changing that first index value. Cool. That's about it. We had a good class today.
Yeah, cool.
Any questions about this before we close out?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, cool. Yay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome and good luck for the rest of the week.
All right, thank you.
Night, guys.
Night.